It took less than 2 minutes for a seemingly routine charity event to erupt into a confrontation that shook the palace to its core. Princess Anne was carrying out her scheduled duties at the Royal Horticultural Hall when Laura Lopes suddenly appeared from a side entrance despite her name being absent from the original official guest list. No curtsy, no pleasantries, not a moment's hesitation. Laura strode straight toward Anne and openly accused her of orchestrating changes to the estate's budget, even implying that the financial audit was being weaponized against Camilla's family. Yet, what silenced the room wasn't the accusation itself, it was Anne's icy reaction. She simply adjusted her gloves, stood motionless for a few seconds, and turned to her security team with a single question. Has the afternoon guest list been checked? Weinstab, now in Digitschool. That wasn't an answer, it was a warning, and Laura wasn't finished yet. Moments later, she stepped closer and leveled an accusation that threatened to escalate the entire situation to a dangerous new level that Princess Anne was secretly colluding with Prince William. Before we dive deeper into this moment that sent shockwaves through the royal family, if you enjoy dramatic stories about the British royals, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future updates. I'd also love to know, where are you following this story from? Please leave your city or country in the comments below. But Laura had no intention of stopping. If Princess Anne's icy question regarding the guest list was meant as a warning that Laura had overstepped, Laura's subsequent reaction showed she was prepared to escalate the confrontation even further. Laura took a step forward. Her voice grew louder and sharper audible even to those standing several meters away. She accused Anne of hiding behind rigid royal protocol to evade responsibility. But then Laura dropped a name that instantly shifted the atmosphere in the hall. Prince William. Laura asserted that the controversial financial audit was not merely an administrative decision. She alleged that Anne had held behind-the-scenes discussions with William, and that the changes regarding the estate's management were directly disadvantaging Camilla's family. Anne remained silent, but behind her pens began to move. Reporters at the event were scribbling furiously. A family dispute had spilled out into a public event, and now the heir to the throne had been dragged into the narrative. Yet there was an even more suspicious detail. Positioned to witness almost the entire confrontation, a freelance photographer stood ready with camera in hand. A telephoto lens was aimed directly at Anne and Laura. The sound of the shutter firing rang out almost from the very first moment, and that raised an unavoidable question. If Laura's appearance was truly a complete surprise, how was it that the camera was in the right place at the right time, ready to capture nearly every second of the confrontation? Anne seemed to realize the situation had moved beyond the bounds of a controllable exchange. She did not argue. She did not raise her voice. Anne simply gave a subtle signal to her security officer. The officer immediately moved through the crowd, positioned himself between Laura and Princess Anne, and asked Laura to leave the main area. Laura was escorted toward the foyer, under the astonished gazes of guests and reporters, who were still scrambling to capture every detail. It all unfolded in less than 2 minutes. Yet those 2 minutes were enough to turn a routine charity event into a serious security incident. As soon as Laura left, an immediate question arose. How did she get in? Palace staff began reviewing entry logs, guest lists, and any last-minute changes made prior to the event. Before long, they discovered an anomaly. Laura's name had been added via a last-minute VIP invitation from a regional branch. The trail led to a regional director, described as having a distant connection to Camilla's family. Records examined after the incident revealed that it was through this individual that Laura's name had made it onto the exclusive guest list, bypassing established security protocols. By sunset, the director had been suspended pending further investigation. However, as the investigation deepened, the palace team realized they might be facing more than just a simple security breach. Someone had helped Laura gain entry. A photographer appeared to have been perfectly positioned in advance. Reporters had witnessed the entire confrontation, and Laura had publicly mentioned a secret audit. If these events were not mere coincidences, who had known what was going to happen? While the security team sought answers, news of the confrontation reached someone else. At that moment, Prince William was attending a high-level virtual meeting. An aide entered the room. William received the report, and just minutes later, his meeting came to an abrupt end. William did not ask for a press release, nor did he ask how the palace would explain the scandal to the media. He made only one request: I want to see the original footage. And William did not have to wait long to get what he had asked for. The raw footage was delivered to his private office, while questions about the incident at the Royal Horticultural Hall were still racing through the palace corridors. But instead of immediately summoning a media team to figure out how to control the narrative, William did the exact opposite. He asked for the room to be kept quiet. No PR advisors. No press releases. No one was to explain away what the camera had recorded. William wanted to see it all for himself. The footage began. On the screen, Laura Lopes appeared amidst the crowd and headed straight for Princess Anne. William observed her approach, the distance between the two women, and the increasingly heated tone as Laura leveled accusations regarding the audit. He heard his own name mentioned. Then William saw Anne's reaction. 3 seconds of silence. An adjustment of her gloves. A question directed at the security team. But William didn't focus solely on Laura. He began to observe what was happening around her. Reporters in the background were immediately taking notes. Some appeared to have been perfectly positioned to witness the entire incident. And in particular, William took note of the freelance photographer whose telephoto lens had been trained on the confrontation almost from the very start. He rewound the footage, watched it again, then paused at a few specific moments. If Laura had truly appeared completely unexpectedly, why was someone positioned exactly right to capture everything? But there was a more serious question. How did Laura know about the audit? That was the detail that completely changed the nature of the incident. A public confrontation could be handled as a security matter. An insult directed at Princess Anne might turn into a media scandal, only to eventually blow over. But the insider information revealed in Laura's accusation suggested another possibility. Someone on the inside had talked. At that moment, William made a decision. The time for patience and compromise was over. If a network was helping outsiders gain access to information personnel or restricted areas, he wanted to know where that network originated. William picked up the phone and called King Charles. The conversation was brief. William explained what had happened with Anne, the breach in the guest list, and the suspicion that information regarding the audit had been leaked. He then made it clear that he wanted to handle the disciplinary and security matters personally. Charles listened in silence. He was already aware of the confrontation. And now, as William described what the footage revealed, the issue no longer resembled a mere family squabble. It had become a question of control within the palace. Ultimately, Charles agreed to let William take action to protect the institution. That was the authorization William needed. At 5:06 p.m., the door to the basement meeting room opened. William walked in, still wearing the same jacket he had on earlier. 5 senior aides were already seated around the long table. There were no pleasantries. William placed his phone on the table, picked up the remote, and turned on the screen. The footage from the Royal Horticultural Hall appeared once more. No one said a word. The room was filled only with the sound of Laura's voice from the recording and the clicking of camera shutters in the background. William let the footage play to the very last second. The screen went dark. He set the remote down. Then he looked directly at the head of security. Who let Laura in? No one answered immediately. A heavy silence hung in the air. For the answer they were about to give did not lead back to Laura Lopes. It led through the guest system, through a series of unusual directives, and finally straight to someone working inside the palace. The head of security began to explain that the guest management system at the Royal Horticultural Hall involved multiple layers of verification. Last-minute changes could be submitted by regional branches, and in exceptional cases, guest names could still be added after the initial list had been finalized. William cut him off immediately. He did not want to hear about the procedure, nor did he want to know how the system was supposed to work. He wanted only one thing. Who authorized it? Silence filled the room again. Finally, an aide admitted that a warning regarding Camilla's family had indeed existed. Those responsible for vetting guests were fully aware of the restrictions. Yet they had disregarded them. William looked the aide straight in the eye. Why? The answer caused the atmosphere to shift instantly. There had been pressure from above. That was the moment the investigation ceased to be solely about Laura Lopes. If an outsider could bypass security protocols simply because someone on the inside exerted pressure, William wanted to know just how deep that chain of influence ran. He demanded that the files on any individuals capable of influencing internal operations be laid out before him. A confidential dossier was opened. Name by name they were scrutinized. Connection by connection they were cross-referenced. And then they found a link. A mid-level palace manager had a family connection to an assistant working for Camilla's camp. The relationship itself did not prove wrongdoing. However, given that Laura's invitation had bypassed established restrictions, William was unwilling to overlook any potential conflict of interest. He closed the file. No debate, no delay. William ordered the manager's access privileges revoked and demanded that the individual leave the premises immediately pending clarification of the matter. Less than 20 minutes later, security personnel escorted the manager out through the back gate. Word spread quickly within the organization, and the message could not have been clearer. William was no longer treating this as a scandal to be shielded from the press. He was treating it as an issue of internal control within the palace. Notably, this suspicion had not arisen overnight. Based on what William had been tracking over the previous 2 months, he had grown increasingly concerned that certain staff members prioritized personal loyalties over their institutional responsibilities. Seemingly private relationships began to raise red flags when they surfaced in connection with decisions regarding the estate's access privileges and internal information. And now, Laura's actions might have inadvertently exposed the very vulnerability William had been hunting for weeks. But a more dangerous question quickly arose. If someone had the power to help Laura bypass a guest restriction, was there also someone capable of passing on information she was never meant to know? While William continued to trace every link in the chain at Buckingham Palace, an official car was pulling away from the Royal Horticultural Hall. Princess Anne sat in the back seat. She remained almost entirely silent. Her phone lay undisturbed beside her. Anne's hands rested on her handbag, her gaze fixed straight ahead. She was no longer dwelling on Laura's insolence. She was replaying folklore, the words Laura had used. The audit, the changes to the estates, the conversations with William. There was one issue Laura seemed to have overlooked when speaking so openly in front of the crowd. Some of that information had never been made public. Anne asked her aide for the list of attendees at the event. She began reading through the names. Then she stopped. On the list, Anne recognized 3 local journalists known to have close ties to Camilla's family. 3 journalists, a photographer standing ready, a last-minute VIP invitation, and Laura showing up with knowledge of a top-secret audit. By then, Anne was no longer wondering if the confrontation was a coincidence. She began to ask a far more unsettling question. Who inside the palace had leaked the secret to them? And that was precisely the question Princess Anne pondered throughout the drive back to Buckingham Palace. She did not call William. She did not contact Charles. Nor did she ask her communications team to prepare a response to what had just transpired. Anne simply sat motionless in the back seat, her hands resting neatly on her handbag, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Yet, in her mind, the confrontation with Laura was replaying second by second. It wasn't Laura's harsh tone. It wasn't the disrespect shown in front of the crowd. It was what Laura knew. The financial audit, the changes regarding estate management, and in particular Laura's mention of the behind-the-scenes discussions between Anne and Prince William. That was not public information. To the best of Anne's knowledge, access to the audit files was extremely restricted. Only about 4 people at the highest level were fully privy to the process. So, where had Laura obtained the information? Anne turned to her aide and requested a list of those present at the event. The paper was handed to her. She read through the names slowly. Then her gaze stopped. 3 local journalists in the hall were known to have close ties to Camilla's family. That fact alone proved nothing. But when Anne weighed that detail against everything that had just occurred, the picture became impossible to ignore. Laura had been added to the guest list at the last minute. A freelance photographer had been positioned advantageously telephoto lens at the ready. 3 journalists had closely monitored the confrontation. And Laura had appeared armed with information she should not have possessed. Anne began to suspect that she had witnessed more than just an uncontrolled outburst of temper. It was possible she had walked straight into a confrontation orchestrated to become a media story. But Anne knew that suspicion was not proof. She needed a lead. Before the car reached Buckingham Palace, Anne contacted an acquaintance with an intelligence background. Her request was specific trace, the communications related to the audit, particularly any encrypted emails that might have leaked outside the circle of authorized recipients. Anne wanted to know where the information had gone. More importantly, she wanted to know who had sent it. By the time the car pulled into Buckingham Palace, darkness had fallen. Walking down the corridor, Anne saw light still spilling from William's office. She understood immediately. William hadn't stopped working either. But the 2 of them were approaching the same problem from different angles. William was tracking the people involved. Anne was tracking the information. And if those two paths converged, the incident involving Laura would no longer be viewed as an isolated event. Anne returned to her desk and opened the asset management files. The audit report, personnel lists, approval signatures, changes in access rights. She began cross-referencing the documents. A name emerged, then a connection. Next, another sensitive position linked indirectly to individuals in Camilla's circle. No single detail was enough to prove a coordinated scheme. But, viewed together, Anne saw a disturbing pattern. Personal connections seemed to be inching closer to positions with access to royal information and assets. That was the moment Anne's investigation began to intersect with William's. One side asked, "Who let Laura through the door?" The other asked, "Who let the information out?" Meanwhile, in William's office, an aide had just received a new report. It had nothing to do with the guest list. It wasn't an email. It wasn't another palace staff member either. William opened the file and examined the data before him. For the first time since the investigation began, the trail did not lead to a name. It led to a flow of funds, and it was precisely those cash flows that steered the investigation in a direction William could not ignore. Up to this point, the situation could still be viewed as a series of human-related issues, an unusual invitation, an employee overstepping their bounds, a leaked source. But the new report on William's desk pointed to a completely different trail. His team had discovered encrypted calls between Camilla's phone and a prominent law firm in the city. Contacting a lawyer was not unusual in itself. What caught William's attention was the timing. The calls occurred precisely while the financial audit was quietly underway. William set the report down on the desk. If this were merely a coincidence, it might mean nothing. But after what had just happened with Laura, he was no longer willing to overlook any coincidence. A possibility began to take shape. Had Camilla's camp known about the audit beforehand? And if so, had a legal strategy been prepared to protect assets, interests, or financial structures that might be at risk? William summoned his chief legal advisor. He asked a direct question. If accounts or transactions requiring clarification were discovered, could the palace halt the movement of funds before the lawyers took action? The answer was not what William had hoped for. It would be very difficult. Some of the funds were held within complex trust structures that were not under the palace's direct control. Intervention required clear legal grounds. Mere suspicion was not enough. William did not argue the point. He shifted tactics. If he could not yet touch the money, he wanted to know where the funds had gone, the source of the interests involved, and who stood to benefit. He ordered a broader review. Land ownership certificates, rights attached to the estates, trust funds, financial obligations, contingent liabilities, and crucially any transactions showing signs of irregularity within the files currently under review. The layers of the story began to peel back. The confrontation, lasting less than 2 minutes at the Royal Horticultural Hall, had now triggered a review that threatened to expose issues dating back long before Laura had even stepped into the venue. William understood that from this moment on, a single leak could turn the entire investigation into a media war. So he issued a new directive: 48 hours of absolute control. No leaks, no private conversations with the press, no public reactions, no confrontations allowed outside of closed-door meetings. Any staff member breaching confidentiality could face immediate consequences. The palace fell silent, but behind closed doors, William was preparing for the most significant decision since the crisis began. He met with King Charles once more. This time, William spoke little about Laura. He spoke about the system. Someone had overstepped the boundaries of a guest. Confidential information appeared to have slipped beyond their control. Personal relationships had emerged around sensitive roles. And now, financial trails needed to be clarified. In William's view, the issue was no longer just about how a member of Camilla's family had behaved at an event. The question had become, who is permitted access to the royal machinery, and where should that influence end? William wanted a formal measure. He proposed stripping Camilla's family members of the access rights and institutional privileges currently under scrutiny until all matters were resolved. Charles did not answer immediately. He sat motionless before the documents William had laid down. Finally, the king agreed in principle. William had what he needed to prepare for his next move. But elsewhere, the consequences of that decision were already surfacing before the decree had even been placed on the table. Laura Lopes was no longer standing defiantly before Princess Anne, as she had been that afternoon. She was sitting in a dimly lit room surrounded by half-packed boxes. Her phone kept lighting up. Then her brother walked in. His face had gone pale. He placed his phone in front of Laura and told her they had just received a notification from the bank. Laura looked at the screen, and for the first time since entering the Royal Horticultural Hall, she began to realize that those 2 minutes of confrontation might have cost her far more than she had ever imagined. Just hours earlier, she had stood before Princess Anne under the gaze of dozens, believing she was forcing the palace to confront questions her family felt had been dodged for far too long. Now the tables had turned. Laura sat in the dimly lit living room. Around her lay half-packed boxes and papers scattered across the table. Her phone kept lighting up with new notifications. The reaction across media and social networks had exploded. According to figures cited in reports, negative comments regarding the confrontation had generated around 4 million interactions in just a few hours. But Laura barely cared about the criticism anymore. Her brother had just entered the room, bringing news of a far more serious issue. Their personal accounts were under scrutiny. The bank was demanding documentation to prove the source and legal basis for transfers exceeding $5,000. Laura stared at the notification. There were no direct accusations, no conclusions drawn, just requests for paperwork. But she understood what it meant. The scrutiny was now reaching their personal finances. And then came a second notification. Laura and her brother had to vacate the estate management offices by the end of the week. One by one, things began to slip away. Access, the office, connections that used to be just a phone call away, the support system they had relied upon. And now their finances were under the microscope too. It was then that Laura began to ask a question she had never imagined she would need to ask. Where was Camilla? Laura had expected her mother to intervene, a call to Charles, a private meeting, perhaps a discreet arrangement to prevent matters from escalating further, but no call came. Camilla remained silent, and that silence worried Laura even more than the newspaper headlines. She began to wonder if her mother was trying to protect her children, or if she had realized that any intervention at this point might only worsen the crisis. Then a black car pulled up outside. A courier stepped out carrying a sealed package of documents. It was from Camilla's lawyer. Laura opened the envelope. The message inside was brief, but every line was cold and unequivocal. No interviews, no social media posts, no public reactions, no contact with the press. The letter warned that an audit had uncovered certain transactions requiring clarification. If the dispute escalated further, or these issues moved beyond internal handling, the legal consequences could become far more severe. Laura read the letter again. This time she began to understand why Camilla hadn't called. The silence might not have been an act of abandonment. It might have been the only way Camilla had left to keep the situation from getting worse. Laura picked up the phone and called a contact at the financial firm that had managed the trust accounts. She waited. No one answered. She called again. The line was no longer working. Laura slowly lowered the phone. Only then did she truly look around the room. The boxes, the documents, the bank statements, the letter from the lawyer. In just a few days, the system that had once made her family feel secure was being dismantled layer by layer. And the bitterest part was that it had all started with less than 2 minutes at a charity event. But Laura still didn't know what William was planning. For during those 48 hours of absolute control, a document was finalized behind closed doors. Not a press release, not a warning, but a document capable of officially altering the relationship between Camilla's family and the royal establishment. Then came the following Monday. At Buckingham Palace, the corridors leading to the Privy Council room were unusually quiet. King Charles was already there. The door opened. Prince William entered carrying a folder. He approached the long table and placed the document before the king. No Laura, no Anne, no cameras. Just 2 men and a decision that could make what Camilla's family had just lost permanent. Before Charles lay the dossier William had just brought in. William did not need to recount the entire story. The king had already seen the reports, the breach in the guest list, the questions regarding the source of the leak, the internal relationships under scrutiny, and the financial matters still requiring explanation. Now William wanted a decision. He placed the decree before Charles. According to the document, the remaining institutional privileges enjoyed by members of Camilla's family were to be revoked or curtailed invitations to events, access to certain areas and activities, specific forms of support, and official ties to the royal establishment. For William, this was no longer about punishing Laura. It was about drawing a line, a boundary separating family ties from access to the crown. Charles looked down at the document. No one urged him to act. William stood motionless on the other side of the desk. The king had witnessed a charity event spiral into a crisis in less than 2 minutes. He also knew that the subsequent investigation had raised questions far more significant than the actions of a single individual. Finally, Charles picked up his pen. He signed, a single signature. Yet it marked the conclusion of a chain of events that had begun on Tuesday afternoon. Laura had appeared at an event where her name was not on the official list. She had confronted Princess Anne. Anne had raised security concerns. William had demanded the raw footage. A VIP invitation had been traced back to its origin. A palace staff member had been removed from their post. Anne had set out to find the source of the leak. William had expanded the inquiry to include finances. 48 hours of absolute control had been enforced. And now it all culminated in the document before the king. At least that was what everyone in the palace believed. A copy of the decree was then delivered to Camilla's residence. And then they waited. An hour passed. No call came. No request to see Charles. No objection lodged with William. No word from lawyers. A few more hours ticked by. Still silence. This only heightened the unease of those waiting. They had braced for a confrontation, yet Camilla denied them that clash. Finally, confirmation arrived. Camilla had signed for the documents. No objection. No statement. No request to alter a single term. She simply accepted the delivery of the decree. Yet it was that very composure that gave William's victory an unsettling quality. Had Camilla flown into a rage, the palace could have prepared a countermove. Had she raised objections, William would have known exactly where she stood. But Camilla did nothing. And sometimes in a power struggle, silence is more unpredictable than a threat. William stood by the window, looking down at the courtyard. He had achieved his objective. The security breach had been addressed. Internal associations had been scrutinized. Access for Camilla's family had been curtailed. A new boundary had been drawn. But there was one thing William could not know. Was Camilla silent because she had accepted defeat? Or did she realize that at this moment, any reaction would only give William further grounds for action? If so, that silence was not surrender. It might well be a strategic retreat. And that is why the story was not truly over. Laura might be the one to light the fuse. Anne might be the first to sense something amiss. William might be the one to close the door. Charles might be the one to affix the final signature. Yet, Camilla was the only one to end the crisis by saying absolutely nothing. William may well have shut the palace doors on Camilla's family. But the bigger question remains. Has Camilla truly accepted defeat, or is she simply waiting for a more opportune moment to strike back? What do you think? Is Prince William doing what is necessary to protect the crown, or has he gone too far by removing the influence of Camilla's family from the royal establishment? Share your thoughts in the comments section. And if you followed the story to the end, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future updates on what's happening behind royal doors. Thank you so much for joining us. See you in the next story.